Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. I'm your host, Lasheena Williams, and so glad to be back here with you all, continuing the conversation on the art and science of measurement and evaluation for your nonprofit. Today, I have special guest, Tiffany Nobles, with me, and I'm so excited for you all to meet her and to dive deeper into this month's conversation. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining. Before we get started, if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about your nonprofit journey and where you are in the nonprofit world today.
Yeah. So I've got started in the nonprofit space. I think I was born into it. I've always wanted to help organizations. Even in grad school, that was the thing. I was like, I
Mhm,
want to study nonprofits. So I started working in nonprofits, and then about 14 years ago, I was assigned to do grant writing
mhm,
for the nonprofit that I was working in, and I was like, I have no idea what this is. Like, what you want me to? I can spell grant. That's about it.
mhm.
And so I got voluntold to do grants and ended up really enjoying it and transitioned to a few other organizations. And now I've actually been consulting full time since 2020. So I'm 5 years in full time consulting, but I've had my consulting business for 9 years. This
Mhm.
will be 10 years.
Yeah.
So helping nonprofits just from the other side of all aspects of things related to grants, grant strategy, and all of that, and just using grants to get funded to do their mission.
Oh, that's awesome. So this topic is perfect for you because I know in the grant space, evaluation,
Mhm,
measurements, all
mhm.
that is very, very important. So what tips would you have for organizations around this month's topic of measurement and evaluations for your nonprofits?
Yeah, so like you said, grants definitely measurement and
Mm-hmm.
evaluation definitely connects with grants. If you're not able to tell the impact that you're making, then why should anyone give you money? And that's
Mm-hmm.
basically that's what it comes down to in a nutshell. If you can say that you're the greatest, but you can't prove that you're the greatest, or that you should be funded in addition to another organization or instead of another organization, then nobody cares. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
funder saying, why should I care? Why should I trust you with my money?
Mm-hmm.
Why should I trust you with my partnership, with my investment? And so when organizations are trying to show their impact, to tell that story of the impact that they're making, whether it's with individuals or it's with a whole community, or it's with other, if they're an organization, maybe they're working with small businesses, whatever it is, they have to show that. So if they're tracking and measuring how they are changing, how the intervention that they're providing is changing the participants from point A to point B. Good example would be if you're providing after school services.
Mm-hmm.
If kids coming to you are coming every day and they are, they have low reading scores, they have low math scores, you come in, you're providing some homework assistance, you're doing tutoring, things like that, those types of interventions, and their grades are still the same,
Mm-hmm.
not really making an impact. But if their
Mm-hmm.
grades are changing and they're moving from grade to grade the way they should be, they are seeing that increase. They're moving from possibly not going to school every day or not on track to graduate to being on track to graduate. That's how you're showing that impact. You can tell a funder, this is what we've been doing. And not
Mm-hmm.
just funder. I mean, the funding is definitely important, but even just telling the community where you're providing those services, here's how we're making a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And, I find a lot of times there's organizations like, well, we want to do XYZ. Okay, well, the organization next door to you is doing XYZ. Why do we need both of you doing it? Why
Mm-hmm.
you're doing different? And you measure that, you evaluate that. Um, a lot of times people will say to me, oh, well, we started out with 10 people, now we have 20. And I'm like, well, why do you think that changes? Well,
Mm-hmm.
we don't really know. We don't track anything. We don't track, we don't do pre and post surveys. We don't ask any questions. We don't check the grades of the after school participants. And I said, well, do you serve food? And they're like, well, yeah. I said, well, they came for the food. Well,
Mm-hmm.
no, if you can't prove anything else to me, they came for the food. That's the only reason why they
Yeah.
And, and so I try to help organizations really just think about that and
Mhm.
evaluating evaluating if it's working the way that you're presenting it.
Mhm.
And if it's not, it's okay to make some changes. Sometimes that's just slight little tweaks that make
Mhm.
it better. Sometimes that it's what we were doing isn't working or it's not needed in the way we were doing it. Now we need a complete overhaul so that we can do this better and show
Mhm.
up better instead of, well, we've always done it this way. So we're just going to keep doing it this way. We don't
Mhm.
know if it's working or we know it's not working, but we're still going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
So just using the measurement of your progress and using those evaluation tools and things like that just to make improvements, show that you're working. Somebody comes in, they want to know, well, why do you think this is needed?
Mhm.
And I think about budget cuts a lot of times. So people are
Mhm.
doing budget cuts. We all know the government's cutting everything right now.
Mhm.
If you were part of that and you're getting funding from like a federal government resource and you've never been tracking anything to show that you're relevant, to show that you're making a change, why should they keep you? Why should they
Mhm.
care? Um,
Mhm.
and it really can be, in some instances, it could be the life or death of your organization if you're not tracking it away.
Wow, that's so good. Um, and I love that you also touched on how this translate into the grant realm,
Mhm,
being able to show your funders the impact that you're making.
mhm.
Otherwise, you're just providing food,
Right, I
like you
mean,
say, right?
when I tell people, when I say it
Yeah.
like that, I
Yep.
think people get it. They're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wait a minute. Wait a minute."
Mhm. Right.
Yeah, that's not what we're doing. We're not just providing snacks. Yeah, you are, 'cause
Right.
you're not tracking anything, you know?
Right. And let's talk a little bit more about how not having, measuring the impact and not evaluating the success of your programs, impact the success rate of getting funding,
Mhm,
grants, and so forth. We could talk a little bit about that because sometimes organizations will start the 501(c)(3) and go straight to grants, missing everything in between, and then not also not have the things to be able to demonstrate the impact that they're
mhm,
making. So you're spending all this money, and oftentimes they're contracting a grant writer,
mhm,
spending all this money with
mhm,
a low rate of potentially getting that grant.
mhm. So, I'll tell you, in the 14 years I've been doing grants, I haven't had an application yet that hasn't asked about your outcomes, what your evaluation process is, what do you plan to do with the money? Like, those are questions that are always in there. So if you're not
Hmm.
tracking it, how are you even completing the application?
Hmm.
Are you making something up? And here's the thing, if you make it up and put it in there and you get funded for what you put in there, you're now expected to do what you put in there.
Hmm.
So make sure that whatever you say you're going to track, you actually are set up to track, and then you can share what happened outside of that. Have like set goals, but be realistic.
Hmm.
And then be realistic about what you can actually track. If what you say you're going to track requires software that you don't have money to pay for,
Hmm.
don't say you're going to use that software. You should go back to an Excel worksheet to get started. Like stay where you need
Right.
to be, and then
Right.
keep going, from there. And I think a lot of grants have been doing that, asking those questions around
Hmm.
your outcomes and things more increase over every year, and they want you to be so specific. You can't
Hmm.
just have one goal, you have to have at least 3. You can't say, well, we're just going to do this at some point. No, you have to have it, has to be time bound. So how many months are you going to do this? Are you just going to
Hmm.
be providing the service for 12 months and hope it works, or are you going to be checking in at different intervals? They're going to ask those questions because the money is not, it's out there, but it's not overflowing like people think it is.
Hmm.
And so there are a lot of people competing for the same pot of money, sometimes for pots of money that have been shrinking time after time. So you have to really step it up. And that's what it comes down to is, are you better than the person next to you? Or are you just as good as them? And so they're going to fund both of you?
Hmm.
Or are you going to be sitting on the corner going, I wish I would have had some measurements. I wish I would have
Right.
been evaluating what I was doing.
Yep.
Oh, why do they keep getting money? They've been getting all this money. And looking at what your competitors are
Mm-hmm.
doing. The same way businesses do it, that's what nonprofits should be doing. Who else is in your industry? Who else is in your field doing the exact service? Might be slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's not your competitor, but find out who exactly is so that you can see who are they getting funded by? What
Mm-hmm.
are they doing that's different? And then figuring out ways to either piggyback off of some of that, learn from them, or even reach out and partner with them.
Mm-hmm.
You partner with them and the two of you come together and really have great tools, great intervention, and all this. You can ask for more money
Yeah.
because they're like, well, there's two of you, so you can serve more people. You can have
Mm-hmm.
greater impact instead of, oh, no, this is just my pot over here and I'm going to keep it and I'm not going to share anything with anybody.
Oh, I love that. And something that hit me is you're talking about being realistic in your measurements and on what you plan on evaluating. And I remember early on, because I also have a nonprofit organization. When we initially started, we were all learning volunteer led, like many of our
Mm-hmm.
nonprofits starting up.
Mm-hmm.
And we had volunteers helping us write some grants. Okay, great, awesome. And as a part of that, we won one of our first government grants, and it was awesome. But the funny thing about it was in the grant, because the grant and the program team, and this happens a lot in nonprofits, they're normally separate. So what happens is, even working for a national organization, I've seen this. The grant team will write these amazing ways to measure and evaluate. It sounds really good on paper, but then the grant is won, and then you're getting ready to implement it, and you're like, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Mm-hmm.
doing a test, a pre and post test every session is not realistic.
Right.
Like
No.
yeah. So go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly right. You have to, it can't be done in silos. There has to be
Yeah.
that conversation.
Yeah.
Whether you have an in-house grant writer, a volunteer, or a paid contractor, you can't,
Mm-hmm.
no one should expect that person to just write it without input and reviewing it. Because
Mm-hmm.
like I said, if you get funded for what they wrote, then you're expected to do it.
Yep.
Because then you have
Yep.
to tell the funder why you didn't do it the way you
Mm-hmm.
said you were going to do it.
So true. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so important not to just leave it on a grant writer. Like, all teams involved have to review that, so that when it's won, you don't have to go back and talk to the funder about, hey, we're not going to be able to live up to this
Mm-hmm.
deliverable. And that's when you risk, because some funders are very good, they're going to work with you, and some,
Mm-hmm.
not saying that they're not very good if they don't work with you, but what I'm saying is
Yep.
some funders will work with you and some are not. They're going to say, this is what we advertised, this is what you said, we need you
Mm-hmm.
to deliver exactly what you said.
Yes. Or give us our money back.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And
Yep.
then I tell people, then you're in their system with the little red flag. Don't fund them because they don't do what they said they were going to do. They're
Yep.
not going to tell you you're in that system, but you're in that
You're
system.
in there.
It
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah. It's there.
It definitely exists.
Yeah.
It exists internally. And funders talk to other funders.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a red flag with one, you might silently have, like, it might not be completely red, but it might be pink with the other people. Because
Yep.
you get that faded flag with other people.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
everybody's looking at, oh, wait a minute. And then, I tell people, if you're doing local funding, local grants, they're really going to talk to each other a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And you have people that may leave one funder and go to work for another, and they take
Mm-hmm.
that information with them.
Mm-hmm.
That happens a lot with, like, banks with their foundations. You have somebody that leaves one bank, they go to the next bank, and they're still doing the same job. And they're like, oh, I remember you from over
Yep.
there. You can't get any money from me.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't even submitted the application yet, but they already know they're not going to give you any money.
Oh, that's
because
so
you
good.
don't follow through, or you say one thing, do something else.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's so good. So let's talk about, because we're talking about this, because it's real.
Mm-hmm.
Nonprofits will apply for grants even when they're not grant ready. So if we if we can talk a little bit about being grant ready, because you don't want to hop out there too soon and then you end up with this reputation. And a lot of times in towns, you don't like the funders, it's a very close, community, like
Mm-hmm.
you said, that know one another.
Mm-hmm.
It's very like after you mess up your reputation with them, you have to just, you got to work on redeeming it because it's nowhere else you can go. So if we could talk a little bit about at what point from a grant standpoint, would you say an organization is ready to apply for grants?
So it will vary by each organization to
Mm-hmm.
some extent, but for the most part, and this is something like I teach on a lot. I have a grant readiness guide that I
Mm-hmm.
have the people. I'm like, go, I give it away. Just take it and use it. But it's, making sure you have the right people,
Mm-hmm.
the right resources.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the top things you need. Before
Mm-hmm.
you even sit down to write anything, you have to have who's going to run the program,
Mm-hmm.
who's going to manage the money when it comes in, and it should not really be the same person that's running the program. You need to
Mm-hmm.
have that separation. Are you collecting any data so that you can measure how you're doing and evaluate it? If you're
Mm-hmm.
not collecting any data, then you are literally just serving meals.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're collecting, what's that impact? What is, people changed from here to there, whatever. Um, Having that support, having those systems in place when you're going to operate the program, who's going to run it, who's going to manage everything else, who's going to get the participants, who's going to do the outreach.
Mm-hmm.
If I have sometimes organizations that'll come to me, people will reach out and it's like, I want to hire you to be my grant writer. And I'm asking these questions and I'm like, so who works for you? It's just
Mm-hmm.
me. I started this. I will have a full-time job. I want to do this. I want to eventually transition over to full-time running my organization, and I'm going to do it using grants. Well, first of all, don't do that because grants should not be your only stream of funding.
Mm-hmm.
But then who's going to give you a bunch of money if it's just you
Mm-hmm.
and you have a full-time job?
Yep.
And so you're going to run the program, run the finances, manage all the other stuff while you're still working this full-time job. I'm not saying there aren't people that do it,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that there are some people out there that they're doing it. They're burning the candle literally at both ends doing it. But are they doing it well? Are they
Mm-hmm.
being truly successful? Are they getting funding that they need? Are they applying for grants and they're getting, $1,500 grant, $2,000 grant, a $5,000 grant, but with a little bit of help and a little bit of systems and a little bit of planning ahead of time, they could be applying and receiving $10,000 grants, $20,000 grants, $100,000 grants.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
You can, 5,000 could mean a lot to a small organization, but I guarantee you 100,000 means a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can set yourself up for success and okay, I have a plan. I'm going to go
Mm-hmm.
do X, Y, Z, and I'm going to do it on this timing and I have these systems in place,
Mm-hmm.
then I can definitely go from there. If you're paying for everything out of your pocket up front,
Mm-hmm.
until you get funding in to cover it. And you're tracking those expenses because you want to eventually get reimbursed. Good. Where are you tracking those systems?
Mm-hmm.
Are you tracking those expenses? Do you have you literally went out and bought a ledger at Staples and you're like filling it out? Are you using an Excel spreadsheet? Are you using like QuickBooks or something? Or like one woman I had talked to at one point, do you have a shoebox full of receipts that don't make any
Mm.
sense? They're not categorized. And then you want me to explain your financial management system out of this shoebox.
Mm.
That's the difference between being grant ready and not being grant ready. A lot of people think, well, I'm ready because I'm broke and I need the money.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'm like, tell a funder why they should care that you're broke and you need the money.
Mm-hmm.
Having something that is fundable, having a
Yep.
service or program that can be funded.
Yep.
Everything you do is not eligible for grant funding. You
Right.
have to find a funder that'll be like, yes, I will support you in that work.
Mm-hmm.
And that means doing your research around it being needed. What's
Yep.
the need in the community that you're trying to address? And
Mm-hmm.
how do you know that your program, what's the research you've done on that your program, your intervention, your service is going to be able to even tap that need? Forget completely addressing it. How are you going to even
Yeah.
just touch it enough? And if
Mm-hmm.
you can't explain that, you're not grant ready, because that's a question on almost every grant application. What's the need you're trying to address?
Yep.
Why is what you're doing needed? How are you going to make a difference?
Yeah.
Knowing your target population.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I want to help everybody. Okay. Good luck with
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
that. But if you can say, I want to help Black and brown youth in underserved communities ages 13 to 19 with these specific services, now you're
Yeah.
one step closer to being grant ready.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say the other thing that is like, I feel like it encapsulates everything about grant readiness is
Mm-hmm.
patience.
Mm.
Because people think I'm going to apply today, I'm going to have a check tomorrow, and I'll be out here doing big things the day
You.
after that.
Hmm.
No. If you apply for a grant and get a response in 60 days, you found a great one. Because a
Yeah.
lot of them take 90 days to 6 months
Mm-hmm.
just to get an answer.
Yep.
And that's if they only have one process. They've got a more than one step process. It's going
Yeah.
to take you even longer.
Yep.
And if you're like, well, I was hoping to get it, and
Yeah.
okay. But yeah, grant readiness is real. And the
Yeah.
number of people that look at me sideways when I say that term, they're like, what? What is that?
Yep.
I was like, then you're clearly not grant ready, because you don't even know
Right.
what it is. Like,
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm there with you because oftentimes I would hear, like, yeah, I'm grant ready. Do you have unrestricted funding coming into your organization? A lot of these higher end grants, they're on reimbursements. Do you have,
mhm,
you're applying for 50,000, 100,000. Do you have 50,000, 100,000 in an account? So like
mhm,
those type of conversations we have to have, like, it's, uh, if anything, focus on getting some of those unrestricted funds in there, maybe requesting some sponsorships, do
mhm,
some of those things, build up your funding that way. And then, okay, now that we're here, we test the water, because even with that, that's going to give you a little, some sponsorships, like they're going to ask you still, what's the
mhm,
impact,
mhm,
what do you expect from, what is your expectation of these funds, and different questions like that. They're going to ask you to start you thinking about some of those things. And then once you kind of do a few of those, starting to explore the world of grants and making sure that you're equipped in order to get those grants and
mhm,
be successful in executing them as well.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all connected. You can't do one
Yeah.
part without the other. You
Mm-hmm.
can't just start applying without really being ready.
Yeah.
It's, you have to think about it, and who's supporting you. That's
Mm-hmm.
another big thing. If you know nonprofits, you get your 501c3 tax status, you're required to have a board.
Mm-hmm.
You can determine what that number of people looks like, but if they are there just in name only, you can't count on them for anything. They don't know
Mm-hmm.
anybody to connect you to. They won't review any proposals. They can't even write proposals for you. Then why are they there? They're not
Mm-hmm.
giving you any money. Now,
They're
if they
just
want to
name on
give
the
you a
paper.
100,000 so that you can get reimbursement grants later, that's different.
Yeah.
But why are they there? What are they helping you with?
Yeah. Yep. Wow, that's good. And I think
Mhm,
it's a good wake up call for some organizations, because unfortunately, I do hear of organizations paying, they just got their 501c3 last week. And then, a couple months later, yeah, we're applying for these grants. And I start cringing. I'm like, oh. And I'm like, do you have your strategic plan? Have you developed your programs yet? Did you do da? They're like, no, we're just,
yeah.
doing it as we kind of go with applying for these grants. I'm like,
No,
mm-mm,
no, no.
mm-mm.
No, because most grants have a time on them. So if
Yeah.
you apply now and can't really start the services until next year, your grant will run out before you have actually done anything.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Yeah.
I just like, no, no, no. And I think just thinking about grant readiness is good, so that, because some organizations think that they're grant ready and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have others that don't think they're grant ready and they are.
Uh-huh.
And so
Yep.
it's not until you really sit down and start thinking about those things, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, what is your strategic plan say? And if you don't have one, how are you going to get one?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also say that that's a difference sometimes between when organizations are looking for someone to write their grants.
Mm-hmm.
That can be the difference between a grant writer, somebody
Mm-hmm.
that only writes, and
Mm-hmm.
then somebody who's more of a consultant or more of an advisor and helps you with grant strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are some people that are like, I just write. I don't tell you if the grant works for you. You tell me you want to apply for it, I just write. And
Mm-hmm.
you pay them just for writing.
Mm-hmm.
They're expecting that you've done everything else. They're like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, they're assuming you've done that.
Yeah.
They're not going to look into that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't, you end up spending a lot of money paying someone and never getting the grants because you weren't really eligible or whatever. And they're
Mm-hmm.
just writing. They're not, guiding you through this process. Whereas you have someone that's like, I can actually help you find the grants that actually are aligned to you.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can go and we can apply for these grants to make sure that they are the best fit, that you will have. Now, we can't guarantee. So there's that. A lot
Yeah.
of people are like, well, what's your success rate? I can tell you that in the 14 years that I've been working either in organizations or
Mm-hmm.
working with them as a consultant, I've helped them raise nearly $40 million in funding.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of a success rate, I don't calculate that. It's very hard to, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
control whether or not you get a grant.
Mm-hmm.
I can write one and it could be the best grant. And a funder could even say to you, this was a really great grant, but we ran out of money by the time we got to your proposal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or it was great and we read everything, but the committee decided to pick these 5 and not these 5, and you
Mm-hmm.
weren't those 5 we didn't pick.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it's really making sure you've got a plan, and it's not a one-time thing. It shouldn't be operated in silo. You've got to work and plan things out, make those connections, build relationships as much as possible with funders.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you government funders, you really don't get to build a relationship. You're submitting things in there.
Mm-hmm.
But also making sure the grants you're going after are good return on your investment. So if
Yep.
and not just investment of you paying a grant writer, investment of the time and energy it takes for you to provide the information for a successful
Mm-hmm.
application. If
Yes.
you're going to write the application yourself, the time and energy you're taking to do that, because while you're busy writing the grant, that means you're not doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And if that other thing that you're not doing is actually your job, like if you're the CEO, but you don't have funds to hire somebody, or you don't want to hire somebody and nobody else there can do it, and you end
Mm-hmm.
up writing the grant, that's time you're taking away from being the CEO and managing things that you need to be actually managing over here.
Wow. Yep. And I'm glad we addressed some things, because those are things that come up often in conversation. And I think it's just a matter of just continuing to educate nonprofit organizations, especially those starting out, because you are going to come across grant writers that's not going to talk about whether you're ready or not. They just going to write, and you're going to just keep shelling out money, and you're going to be like, why am I not winning it? Because you weren't ready from the beginning. But they're
Mm-hmm.
just doing what their job as a grant writer and just
Mm-hmm.
writing. So I'm glad we talked about those things as to what to look for there. Something else I want to touch on that comes up often, and another thing that makes me cringe is sometimes I will hear like, hey, this person was gonna write the grant and write themselves into it. Can we talk about that? Yes.
Mm-mm.
Yes.
Let's not do
Yes.
that. Let's not do
Yes.
that.
Right.
Yeah, though the people that agree to do that they mess it up for the people like me who are actual grant professionals, that we
Mm-hmm.
actually do this for our job. Those are often people who are not actual grant
Mm-hmm.
professionals. That's somebody that was like, I can write, it's not that hard. And so they're
Right.
going to write themselves into it.
Yep.
So most funders don't want to pay for your grants person.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you've got an unrestricted general operating grant, they usually don't want to see in your budget that that person is in there, because
Mm-hmm.
like that's not necessarily keeping things running, right? Um, I would never get paid if I wrote myself into a grant, first of all, because if you don't get it, you don't have money to pay me.
Right.
You not getting the grant is out of my control, and so it is not a reflection of my worth as a grant writer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are some people who will. I saw this when I started consulting full time. I saw some people who were on places like Fiverr and Upwork talking about, I'll
Mm-hmm.
write your grants. I came across somebody that was on there that was saying they could write grants for $10 an hour. You get what you pay for.
Right.
I mean,
That part
you
right
get
there.
what you pay for. And so
Yes.
the lowest
Yes.
price is not, this is not, a value meal. The
Mm-hmm.
lowest price is not the best option. You have to vet who you're going to
Yep.
hire, whether they're going to be an employee, the same way you would not just pick a person to work in your organization as an employee. You should not be picking a consultant, a contract, any of those people the same way.
Yep.
If you're going to be paying them to write, you need to see writing samples.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't want to give you any, can't give you any, red flag. Don't even go any
Yeah.
further.
Yep.
And they can't even say, oh, well, I can't give you, I don't have any writing samples that I could give you because they have client information. You can redact a lot of things and
Mm-hmm.
still, you know what I mean? I redact stuff,
Yeah.
and you don't have to know who it's for, what the program name is. But here's the other thing, that when people say that to you, like, oh, well, it's private information. It actually probably isn't.
Right.
Because depending on the funder, I can make an information. If it's government funding, I can make
Yeah.
an information request and ask to see it.
Right.
No different.
Right.
I can ask to see. I know who was funded. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not, but you should see what they write, how they write. Because if you pay them to write for you, they give you a draft to review, and then you have to completely rewrite that draft. So now you're paying double
Yep.
because you've paid them, because they've spent time. So they're going to expect their money.
Yeah.
Now you have to spend time redoing everything. And then if you're being paid by your organization, then you're still being paid for that, but then you're not being paid for you're not doing the other work you're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just out here wasting time, energy, effort, everything, because you didn't take the time to vet people. It doesn't take that
Yes.
long. It doesn't. What are you looking for? Let me have one or two writing samples. The same way you do
Mm-hmm.
references. Ask for references.
Yep. Yes.
And don't ask for them if you're not going to check them.
Right.
You ask for them, check them. They give them
Right.
to you. What was your experience working with such and such and such?
Yep.
How did that go? How were they in terms of, time and deliverables? How do they work? Are they giving you everything the day it's due?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you able to build in time to look at it and review it and make edits and all of that?
Love it. Yes. So no one here tuning in can't say they don't know how to vet a grant writer. And if they say they're going to build themselves in, that's honestly when I know, like, yeah, that's not the grant writer you want to go with.
No. And
Yeah.
there are orgs. So like, I'm a member of the Grant Professionals Association.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Global organization.
Yep.
Anyone who is a member, we are held by a code of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
We don't write ourselves into grants.
Mm-hmm.
So if you meet somebody that says, I'm a member of the Grant Professionals Association, I'll write myself into this grant. First of all, I'm going to tell you right now, report them.
Yeah.
Because I would. Because they're not supposed to do that.
Right.
Yep. But you also, that is a red flag, because it diminishes. It's the same thing with, with, like I said, with prices. They're like, "Oh, I'll do
Yeah.
this for $10 an hour." I'm like, I wouldn't have wrote something for $10 an hour in college. So why would I do it
Right. Yeah.
now?
Right. Yep. So true. Love it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. So how can those tuning in follow you, get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. You can look for me under Tiffany Nobles or T Nobles Grant Consulting. Usually, if you just look for my name, you'll find all of that.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn is primarily where I kind of hang out. Um, I do also have a website, tnoblesgrantconsulting.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I have some resources. I'll be adding some more. I'm also working on doing some more training, so those will be out there soon. But grant readiness, there's a whole grant readiness guide on my website for free. You can download, go through the
Good.
questions, and and then there's a contact form on there. So if you're like, I went through these questions, it doesn't make sense, I still need
Mm-hmm.
help. You can still reach out to me. That's the easiest way. I'm always happy to answer questions,
Mm-hmm.
whether you hire me or not. I'm like one of those people, I will answer questions because I would rather you do it right, even if you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it yourself or you're doing it with someone else, than you to be out there doing it wrong, knowing that I could have helped you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh, love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully, you'll come back and join us in future sessions. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.